All right. So welcome to session 2. Got a lot to go over today. And let's just get this girl going.
Welcome to this tutorial.
That wasn't for me. I don't know where that editorial comes from. Yeah, so we're here for session 2 of the Realizing the Promise of the Earth Regeneration Fund. And today we're going to focus on something called the Mimetic Activation Platform. But first, I'm just going to do a quick summary of kind of where we've been in session 1. So in session 1, we took a look at the Earth Regeneration Fund, and we extracted some of the key characteristics that Joe had highlighted, both in his book and his introductory video. And it was a pretty large ask once you really stop and reflect on it. And then we placed it in the context of this sort of larger cultural shift, bringing in the work of Roger Briggs, An Emerging World, that looks at 4 major stages of human civilization to this point. And the most recent one started about 5,000 years ago. It is the stage of material culture. And the assertion is that the meta crisis is really just a manifestation of the deeply held assumptions within material culture that have now been playing out for 5,000 years. And their sort of systemic flaws are, in fact, leading to the meta crisis, the root cause. So the good news is that we are in the middle of a shift to the 5th stage of planetary civilization, what Roger refers to as planetary culture. And it's giving rise to an entirely different set of conditions that could, in fact, lead to a flourishing Earth. And we've talked about the core of this shift. The key memes that are shifting they're shifting in material culture from the memes of separation and domination and exploitation to the memes of interconnection, partnership, and reverence. Now, you probably can't see that. Apologies for the small font here. That's why I'm giving you the verbal track to go with it. But these are just slides from session 1. So both the slides and the video are available. Within that transition, what it affords is the opportunity for a very different future. And we are invited to explore, if we could enable and empower coherent and cooperative collective action at all scales, then just imagine the culture we could have. What if our economic system, our concept of money, our technology, our agriculture, education, governance systems, what if all of those were rooted in the memes of planetary culture, were expressions of planetary culture, and serve to reinforce and sustain the memes of planetary culture? What an amazing civilization that could be. And then I took a tour through my career that included enterprise architecture. And the conclusion of that was, if we're going to have this very different future, then we need to be working on an entirely new kind of enterprise in Horizon 3. And that, in fact, the Earth Regeneration Fund is that kind of enterprise. And that enterprise requires a new mindset. And we talked about the shift from problem-solving mindset to the evolutionary mindset of sense and adapt and respond. I probably made it sound like it's one or the other in the talk last time, but it's really a both and. We still need the problem-solving mindset. We just need to place it in the proper context. And so it's more of a transcend and include kind of concept. But we do need to bring out this evolutionary mindset, this orientation of sensing, responding, and adapting to what we discover. We also talk about how we needed a new architecture, a shift from the provider or app-centric architecture with the silos and the fragmentation and the lack of sovereignty to a person-centric architecture and that sort of expanded membrane of personal coherence. And that's pretty much where we left off last time. But the third requirement of this new kind of enterprise, we said, was a new kind of platform. And that's what we'll be focusing on today, is the MAP, otherwise known as the Mimetic Activation Platform. So the teaser we left with is, what if we could leverage an architecture and a platform that was comparable in power and sophistication and reach to those that have been enjoyed by Fortune 500 companies? But what if that platform was created by and for those on the forefront of our evolutionary transformation? So what might such a platform look like? What characteristics would it have? Can we build it? Is there a path to adoption? Those are all the questions I've been wrestling with for about 9 years. And so what I'll share is one attempt in answering those questions. And I call that the Mimetic Activation Platform because it's there to activate the memes of planetary culture. When I reflect on it, there's different ways of describing it, but recently I've come to describe it as its purpose as bringing agency to imagination. And that includes individual agency to my individual imagination in order to realize my personal vision. But it also means refining and synthesizing, excuse me, our individual imaginations into collective imagination and expressing them in stewarded information commons. And bringing agency to imagination also means amplifying our agency, our individual agency, by collaborating in self-organizing groups. And so that collective agency can then realize collective imagination in order to realize our collective vision of a flourishing Earth. So at this point, I need to start with the disclaimer. I would much rather just have you use the map than have me demo it. Failing that, I'd much rather demo it than talk about it. But unfortunately, the map is still in proof of concept prototyping. So what does that mean? That means, okay, the map concept hasn't been proven. So what I'm telling you is theory. It hasn't been proven. And there's nothing to demo, and there's nothing that you can use. Yeah, big thumbs down from Stephen Morris. I agree, man. There is 18,000 lines of Rust code that are working. It's running on a maturing holochain infrastructure. And there's a number of promising partnerships that are really starting to come together and gain some momentum. But nevertheless, it's reasonable to ask, why am I bringing this story to you now, right? I mean, you haven't even proven it. I can't use it. You can't even show it to me. And frankly, I've been reluctant to share this story for those reasons for a number of years because, yeah, I'd rather have you use it than have me talk about it. But at the end of the last session, Joe gave a possible reason that, frankly, I hadn't considered. And it just grabbed me and I said, oh, yes, this is why I am telling this story now. And he suggested that I channel my inner seductress and that telling a story that's so compelling, that's so seductive, that people will have no choice but to want to help build it. And I thought, wow, yes, thank you for that, Joe. But then I'm thinking, holy cow. I mean, I knew this regenerative movement shit would require a growing edge, but channeling my inner seductress, I don't know. This is outside my comfort zone, right? I mean, my wife and I just celebrated, Terry and I just celebrated our 46th wedding anniversary a few months back, right? So uh, my practice in the arts of seduction have been pretty narrowly focused for about 45 years. So I have no idea. But, we all have to step into whatever the role demands of us, right? So I'll give it my best shot. The good news is in session 4, I'll be offering an incremental path to adoption that you can begin right now. So though you can't use the map right now, I will give you along with some colleagues, we'll give you a path that you can do right now, and that will lead to sort of an on-ramp into the map ecosystem. All right, so let the seduction begin. I'm thinking, okay, we need some mood music here. If I'm going to seduce you into this story. So, of course, I go to Barry White, but that dates me. That goes back to about the 60s, right? So I'm thinking, okay, it's 2024. I got to up my game. I got to get current. Where can I go for help? Oh, I know. Ask ChatGPT. So I asked ChatGPT, what is some great recent seduction music, right? And so the first thing it brought up was from Victoria Monet, On My Mama. Well, Mother Earth, maybe, but some of that title, I'm thinking that's probably not the right vibe. And then the next one it brought up was Water from Tyla. And I thought, well, Joe talks about water a lot and the importance of watersheds. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is it. All right, are you ready? So I listened to it, and here were the lyrics: make me sweat, make me hotter, make me lose my breath, make me water. But okay. So immediately I realized, folks, I have to admit, I've got no game here. I've got no game. And the other thing I realized was those predictions of AI taking over the world, they might have been a little bit optimistic. So anyway, I think I'll give up the idea of mood music, and we'll just you'll have to suffer through my own rather pedantic approach to seducing you into this story. So what is the map? The map is an application services platform whose audacious goal is to foster the emergence of self-organizing evolutionary transformation, and doing that at personal, interpersonal, organizational, interorganizational, and ultimately global levels. It's a platform for Horizon 3 of the Great Transition. It's a platform to support and directly build those models, right? So it's radical. Some would say it's ridiculously ambitious. You could be right if I haven't proven it yet. Still, it grabbed me though, and I can't think of a more important thing for me. It's my calling to manifest it. So the map is open source, open-ended, decentralized, and life-centric. And I'm going to unpack most of those. I think pretty much people know what open source is. But what is this open-ended? You might know decentralized, but what do you mean life-centric? So I'm going to start with the map's core design principles. Because even though it's a technical platform, as I mentioned last time, I don't think what we need is a technological fix. I'm not a techno optimist. I'm not a techno utopian, but technology can play a role. I think the proper role for technology is to be in service to life rather than the other way around. Primacy of the individual, person-centric instead of application or provider-centric. Individual sovereignty. It's my identity. It's my data. I should be in charge of what happens to it, where it goes. Transparency. So collaboration and cooperation, co-creation, they all rely on transparent sharing, right? If I can't be vulnerable with you, if I can't share something, then we can't connect. And similarly, if you're not vulnerable enough to share with me. So there's this interesting tension between individual sovereignty, keeping everything contained, keeping everything private, and the kind of sharing I need to do for true collaboration. But part of individual sovereignty is that we are each free to draw that own balance, our own balance between sovereignty and transparency. And the map tries to support whatever your choices are. Another core design principle is pull rather than push. So this kind of inverts the surveillance model, the predator-prey marketing model, right? Where you're the prey and they're coming after you, right? You're the target market they seek to dominate. Self-organizing, so it's bottoms up, open-ended, and crowdsourced. Holonic structure, which I will explain in a moment, and also omnicentric, which I'll explain in a moment. So those were sort of the core design principles that informed the design of this platform. And Penny, I'm unable to see the chat while I'm sharing. So if you could just kind of monitor the chat and let me know if there's questions, I can pause and take questions.
Okay, well, there was a lot of funny comments in there when you were doing your seduction part, so.
Okay, good. You know, laughter is part of this, right? I love that phrase. Yeah, life is far too important to take seriously. It's kind of how I feel about this. So we had this wonderful infographic last time of what a bioregional funding ecosystem might look like and sort of what its characteristics are. And so on the bottom, there's that bioregional platform. And so I introduced the terminology last time about open source, open-ended, decentralized, life-centric platform. And so what I'd like to do now is sort of really key in this open-ended, because a lot of people recognize the importance of open source, but an open-ended platform has a profound impact on the design. And it's just the opposite. When many people think of the term platform, because they have been used by large tech companies to further their domination, to further their lock-in, they have sort of this negative connotation. And I'm trying to invert that. I'm trying to accept that term for a different environmental context. I can only do that if the platform is open-ended. So as an entree into that, I'm going to ask you to think about your project, you know, your bioregion, whatever your project is. And I'm going to ask you to think about what is your tech stack. Now, I'm giving some choices here. But if you don't see a technology you're using listed here, then type it into the chat, if you would. Just sort of capture what technology are you using on your project that I'm not listing here, right? I'm listing Google Sheets or maybe Airtable, Google Docs. I don't know, maybe you're using Microsoft Word. For community software, you're all using Mighty Networks as part of the design school. A lot of projects are using Highlight, which is another really nice community software platform. You know, our chat conversations, we're all over the map on this one, right? Discord, channel, Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram. I'm just filling time here while you're typing stuff in the chat, by the way. So I'm just reading off the slide, but feel free to just type away. Zoom, you know, some sort of website. Maybe you're building a website in WordPress or Wix or something else. File sharing, a lot of people use Google Drive, maybe using Dropbox. Some folks are using personal knowledge management tools like Obsidian, or I've been becoming fond recently of Capacities. And then for pictures and so forth, a whiteboard, Miro and FigJam and Draw.io are some choices there. Okay. So thinking about a tech stack as a whole is, in enterprise architecture terms, would be phrased as what's your tech portfolio? What are the portfolio of applications of technologies that you have at your in your toolbox that you can bring out and use? This kind of bundles also what's your application portfolio. So I'm not going to get too pedantic about it. I am going to ask another question now. Given that you probably use more than one item on this list and some of your own, who shoulders the burden of integrating all that? Who's the person on your project that makes sure that they're all, all the licenses are up to date and all the software is running and you got interoperability and you synchronizing data between the different sources and so forth, right? There's that integration burden. That's part of what a platform can help with, is pre-integrating these things, right? So you less integration burden on you. So now I'm going to take a look at Mighty Networks in particular. I'm picking this one just because it's one that I know everybody in the design school uses, so you have some familiarity with it. But I'm going to look at it, again, kind of through the lens of enterprise architecture. So one of the things you ask is, well, what's the data model? Data model, ontology, just a fancy word for data model. It's the set of object types that your system knows how to deal with. And so in Mighty Networks, there's about 12. They're shown there. But what if you wanted to manage other types of information that weren't in that 12? What are your options? Well, you could file an enhancement request with Mighty Networks, right? So good luck with that. Get in line, right? Or you could add another tool to your tech stack, right? Well, Mighty doesn't do it, but I found this other tool that will. So I'm going to add that tool to my tech stack. But now I've got more licenses, maybe. I've got the, the integration issues. I've got less coherence now, right? Because now I got two tools and there's this fragmentation and coherence thing that we saw last time, right? All right, well, what's another option? Well, I could switch tools. Maybe there's another tool out there that does everything Mighty does, plus this other thing, this other kind of information. It manages that too. But now I've got migration and training costs, right? We just got people spun up on Mighty, and now you're telling me you want to go to a new platform, and what about all the data, and what about all the chats, and what about all the people, and oh my God, right? So there's lots of migration and training costs, right? So what's your fourth option? You can suck it up and just live without it, right? Can people relate to this, these options if you run into these things? Yeah. Mighty has a group model. You can either have, at the network level, you can either be a public or private network. And at the space level, you can either be public with an auto join option, public, private, or secret. There's a model I wanted that wasn't in this set. So what if your group model is different? What if your, bioregional project has a concept of who the people are in this group that make up the group in the bioregion, right? But I want a group model that doesn't fit. Well, it's the same choices. File an enhancement request, add another tool, switch tools, limit your dreams, right? What if you wanted visualization elements that Mighty didn't offer? You've got the same choices, right? What if you wanted a richer palette of visualizers, right? So you can see that this leads to dynamics that if I'm an application provider, if I flip my hat now, I say I'm the application provider. In this case, let's say I'm the Mighty Networks provider, right? So I'm going to say, okay, well, we don't want people to switch tools, and we don't want them really to limit their dreams. I'd like to, help them realize their dreams. And we don't want to have them add another tool to their tech stack. What if we just enhance it? We're going to do the first. We're going to start expanding this, right? We're going to have more and more capabilities. And this is the move towards app consolidation. Stage 3 of the, stage 3, yes, of the enterprise architecture maturity model is app consolidation. So there's this trend towards app consolidation, and we're seeing it now. So if I just look at chat functionality, we've got chat applications like Signal and ICO, I guess was really popular like 15 years ago. But now we've got Kik and GroupMe and some others that are pretty much single function chat applications. But now you're beginning to see chat applications adding live media. So you can do video now, video conferences in Discord and in WhatsApp and in Telegram. And we're also seeing the live media apps like Zoom. Now they've added a chat feature where you can engage in chats before and after the meeting, not just during the meeting, right? And community software is also adding live media. So Mighty Networks and Hilo are both adding the ability to do live streaming. And then you've got a bunch of apps that monetize themselves by adding enterprise integration. So they plug into enterprise frameworks and offer other things there, right? So that's kind of what the landscape is happening, is you can see this 10 trends towards consolidation. But what that means is also it's growing asymmetric power. Because as the apps get richer in functionality and manage more data, that option of switching tools becomes more and more painful, right? You've got more and more invested in this. And so you kind of get to this lock-in, and that's where, I think I shared the story when I was at Sun Microsystems of the adoption of the Oracle e-business suite, because it could cover the functionality of about 600 of the 1,000 applications we were using to run our business. That's a massive bit of application consolidation, but it's comes with a pretty heavy price tag of growing asymmetric power, right? The tech giants are wielding all the power in this. That is what I mean by a closed-ended architecture. So open-ended design, we're seeing this app consolidation leading to bigger and bigger apps, managing more and more object types. Now, on the slide that I showed before with Mighty Networks and Hilo and Signal and WhatsApp and so forth, each of the apps on that slide manages somewhere between 10 and 40 object types. Okay? 10 and 40 kinds of data. But Horizon 1 civilization runs on a lot more than just chat, live media, spreadsheets, websites, and digital whiteboards, right? So the Oracle e-business suite application that I talked about, how many object types does it have? It has 20,000. There are 20,000 tables in the Oracle e-business suite. And of course, there's lots of parts of the Horizon 1 civilization that run on tools that are capabilities that Oracle e-business suite itself doesn't even offer, right? So how many object types do we think Horizon 3 civilization will need? Well, who knows? But I am damn sure it's a lot more than 50. Is it 20,000? Yeah, probably more. So if we go down this path of apps consolidation, the reason I'm sort of taking you on this part of the tour is I've seen how this movie plays out, right? That's my career. Watch this consolidation into bigger apps with growing and growing centralized power. And so if we really are going to need a lot of object types in Horizon 3, we need to find a different plot line than the app consolidation story. And we know that people are different. And we know that bioregions differ in culture and geology, biology, health characteristics. Every bioregion is different, right? Hyperlocal context matters. So who gets to decide what the object types are? Well, the answer in Horizon 3 has got to be the people, not the tech giants. Does that make sense? An imposed ontology, a data model that's imposed, no matter how big it is, it's going to constrain rather than empower imagination, right? Remember, the map is about bringing agency to imagination. So I want to tap your imagination. I want to empower your imagination. But if I box you in with 30,000 tables that do everything you want, you're limited to my imagination of what you need, right? You're limited to what I come up with, or whoever the designers of the platform are. So open-ended means extensible, but without lock-in. So with that as prelude, any guesses on how many object types the map has?
0, we have to make them.
Yeah, Steve says 0. Any other guesses? Pat?
As many as there are people.
As many as there are people. Okay. Yeah. But does that mean everybody has a quota of only one object type?
I don't know.
You're going to have some design principles for basic patterns, and then they get, just object model. They get instantiated different ways for different people, different areas. So you have a core set, but then you can always add more.
There you go. All right. So good answers, all good answers, actually. And you're all right. But being an engineer and building the software, I need to make design decisions, right? So what I came up with is 1, a hold-on, and a hold-on relationship. That's it. At the foundational layer, the only thing stored are hold-ons and hold-on relationships. So these are self-describing active hold-ons. Every map object is a self-describing active hold-on or hold-on relationship. So the layer 0, the foundational layer of the map ontology, what I call layer 0, consists of self-describing active hold-ons and visualizers, which are ways of visualizing those hold-ons. So what do you mean by self-describing? What that means is when you encounter a hold-on in the wild, you can ask it, well, what type of hold-on are you? Oh, I'm a book hold-on. Oh, I'm a chat message hold-on. Oh, I'm a governance model. I'm a soil sensor. I'm a watershed. I'm a cultural story. I'm a bioregion. I'm a community of practice. I'm a project, right? I think you get the sense of that infinite set of object types is possible since everything's a hold-on and self-describing. If you can come up with a description for it, you've just created a new type.
Hey, Steve, there's a question.
Yeah.
Steve, there's a question. If you could define a hold-on, that would be helpful for, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So a hold-on was coined in, I believe, 1968 by Arthur Kessler in Ghost of the Machine. And a hold-on is basically a term that is trying to capture the fact that everything in reality is both a whole and part of another whole. So it's a whole that can contain subparts, and it's a part that's contained in a larger whole. So a hold-on is the term that refers to both of those aspects. Thank you for the question. So you can ask, what type of hold-on are you? You can say, what types of properties do you have? And what are your current values for those properties? And you can say, what kinds of relationships do you participate in? And to what other hold-ons are you currently related via those relationships? I'm going to give you some concrete examples of these as we go forward, but I think you get a sense of hold-ons related to other hold-ons. What kinds of relationships? And through what visualizations can I view and interact with you? So that what it means to be self-describing. What does it mean to be active? Well, being active means these are not just passive information containers. Hold-ons can do stuff. They offer what John Vervaeke and others might refer to as affordances. But I thought that term had too many syllables. It was a little bit too highbrow. So I just shortened it to dances. So when you encounter a hold-on in the wild, in addition to asking it, what type of hold-on are you? What properties, relationships, and visualizations, you can say, what kind of dances can we do together right now? Based on the current state of the system, what dances are you affording me in the moment? So that's the foundational layer of the map ontology. Layer 1 is where we'll go next. Together, those form map core. And then the extensibility layers, as you were saying, Stephen, let people and Jeff, let the people decide beyond that. So in layer one, as Jeff was saying, you kind of go for some core concepts so everybody doesn't have to do the lift from nothing, right? So I reflected on this a long time. And what I was inspired by was that the complexity of biological life, it still blows me away. It's just generated from 4 types of DNA molecules. Every every DNA consists of only 4 types of molecules, just in different sequences and different combinations, right? Arranged differently on the helix. So I asked myself, what is the minimal set of elements from which sufficient social complexity could be generated? And here's my current hypothesis. Although I do have a degree in philosophy and I have a bent towards philosophy, I'm not asserting this is some deep ontological conclusion. I had my engineering hat on and just said, what are 4 concepts that I think I can get a lot of mileage out of? And that's how I landed on these: agents, memes, resources, and services. And then all of them are interrelated with one another. So for example, you can have a relationship of agent to memes, a stewardship relationship. Memes are stewarded by agents. Agents can also inhibit or exhibit memes. I sometimes talk about the mimetic signature. Every agent has a mimetic signature, just as cells have biological genetic signatures. Agents have mimetic signatures, and those mimetic signatures are expressed in terms of relationships between the agent and a meme that they either inhibit or exhibit. Agents can belong to other agents. We'll get into the whole fractal nesting pattern of agents to arbitrary scale, but agents can belong to agents. Memes can contain other memes. There's a concept of a memeplex, which is similar to a geneplex in biology. A geneplex is a group of genes that replicates better together than those individual genes replicate separately. And so a memeplex is the same thing. A memeplex is a meme, it's a group of memes that replicates together better than those memes would replicate individually. Planetary culture, the memes of planetary culture, of interconnection, partnership, and reverence, that's a memeplex because they mutually reinforce one another.
Hey, Steve,
So
there's another question in the chat here. This is from Jeff. Is a meme a design pattern, or do all 4 have design patterns?
I wouldn't say it's a design pattern. It's actually a layer 1 ontology, and it's a set of related concepts and relationships that can be instantiated.
Well, I more mean, like, would you say a design pattern is a meme, or would all different areas have design patterns that
Oh, I see. Yes, thank you for clarifying the question. Yes, a design pattern would be a meme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Memes can be expressed via resources. So a design pattern might be expressed on a wiki page or in a book. So resources give expression to memes. Memes are kind of the concept, but it could be expressed in a video, in a piece of artwork, in a song, in a podcast, in an article, and so forth. Resources can also be composed of other resources. You can have a holarchy of resources. Agents steward resources. That's what happens in commons. Agents offer services. Services themselves have a mimetic signature. So sort of the aspirational aspects of the service. Oh, this is fair trade, might be a meme. Non-GMO or GMO is a meme that's inhibited by my service. High fructose corn syrup is a meme, maybe, that is inhibited by my by the signature of my service, right? So services can have mimetic signatures, just as agents do. That is, they can exhibit or inhibit certain means. When agents offer services, when service offers are accepted, the result is an agreement. So that's another relationship. And once you have an agreement, you can invoke services via that relationship. Resources flow into and out of services. So resources are the vehicle by which resources flow in our ecosystem. I'm using these as examples to give you just a small sense of the range of possible relationships that could make sense. It's not important you remember these, or I'm not trying to, there's not going to be a test on these at the end, right? But I hope this is conveying that sense of the power that is, generative from these four types and their relationships. Oh, services can also be orchestrated into flows. And I want to remind you that every layer 1 entity is based on layer 0. So every one of these, every meme is a self-describing active holon. Every agent is a self-describing active holon. Every relationship you see in here is an instance of a holon relationship. All right, so what if we had an open source, open-ended, decentralized, life-centric platform? I hope through the ontology, I've demonstrated the importance of what I mean by open-ended and why it's so vital to avoid lock-in, to avoid that asymmetric power exercised by whoever owns the platform. But now I'd like to zero in a little bit more of in what sense is this platform life-centric? And how can it empower autonomous sovereign people to self-organize in fractal holarchies of cooperating groups? And how can bioregions serve as information hubs with agency? And how can they be organized in overlapping holarchies of bioregional agents at global scale? That's where we're going next. So let's talk about agents and spaces and interactions. So I'm in the agents part of the layer 1 ontology, supporting self-organizing groups of agents at ever greater scale. And so for this, as synchronicity happens, and we've all on this call, I know you've all experienced this, when you sort of turn your life over to your dream, things show up. And I had the great honor and privilege of meeting a woman named Diane Tegetmeyer. Diane is trained as a microbiologist, really understood how cellular biology worked, and she became a therapist. And what she did was she realized that the principles of interaction that she observed between cells could be powerfully exapted and used in her healing relationships practice. So she wrote a book called Relationships That Heal, Skill for Practice Within Nature's Web. She kindly sent me a copy, and that became a foundation. So what were the principles she came up with that she distilled? The first is containment. Cells have an encapsulating membrane, and that serves to create an inside. You can talk about what's going on inside the cell, and then what's going on outside the cell. The membrane is a separator, right? It divides an inside from an outside. That membrane is selectively permeable. That's principle number 2. So it selectively allows for resources to flow into and out of the cell. Her third principle was interspace. Interspace is both contains agents, contains cells, is the container for cells, And it's also the medium that allows them to communicate. It's the medium that carries messages from one agent to another, from one cell to another. The fourth principle, differentiation. Evolution of different kinds of agents offering different kinds of services, right? We saw this with especially in the emergence of eukaryotic cells from prokaryotes. And those eukaryotes had mitochondria and nuclei and other kinds of organelles in them that had played a specialized function within the cell. And then with multicellular organisms, right, you get different specialists in that multicellular organism, skin cells and blood cells, for example. And the fifth principle is sense and respond. The receptors and the effectors at the boundary on the membrane of the cell, that they sense, and then internal processes use resources of the cell to then respond to the stimulus, right? So sense and respond. And then finally, the sixth principle, interdependence. Each agent takes care of its own needs while still being an interdependent relationship with the agents within and outside it. So these were the principles that Diane Tegetmeier described in the book. So how does that translate to the map? Well, here's the anatomy of an agent in the map. And remember, agent is one of the four kinds of things at the level 1 ontology. Penny, I know you have your hand up.
Sorry, that was from before. I will lower my
Okay.
hand.
Okay, so let's start with the definition of an agent. An agent is any entity with the capacity to sense and respond to its environment. Any agent and any entity with the capacity to sense and respond to its environment. It has a containing membrane. It has a mimetic signature. Remember, we talked about what memes are inhibited or exhibited by an agent. That's a relationship between the agent, holon, and various memes. So an agent has a mimetic signature. Agents offer services that support the flow and transformation of resources to and from other agents for mutual benefit. So the receptors, if you will, that's sort of the service offering. In software terms, you can think of that as the API, but it's not limited to software services. Inside the membrane is how you're going to deliver that service. That's what I'll call the service implementation. Resources are units of value. And that could mean money, but as Joe pointed out, there's many other kinds of value beyond money. Information is valuable, reputation, food, water, tangible goods, videos, podcasts. Some resources are depleted with use and others aren't. Assets are resources that are temporarily stewarded by an agent. So you see these assets are within the membrane of the agent, so they are assets of that agent. The agent's eye space manages the space inside its membrane. So this is where all your private keys could be stored. If any of you saw Bean's wonderful video on wallets and how to get a wallet, it's a bit cumbersome to manage each individual wallet. A bit of a process, kind of obscure. What if the wallets could be managed for you inside your membrane? You may have more than one persona by which you represent yourself to the world. Those can be managed within your membrane. The application logic you want to use is brought into your membrane. Remember, in the person-centric architecture, instead of bringing yourself to the apps and logging in so you can access the data they're hostaging for you, instead you have your own data inside your membrane. Private storage, you bring the app logic to that private storage. You manage your own assets, you manage your own notifications, and you can have member agents within an agent. Remember, agents are holarchies. Agents are holons. So they have an internal and they have parts that are inside that whole. So an iSpace refers to this, what's inside the membrane. An iSpace can have members, and it's what manages the space inside its membrane. WeSpaces manage the interactions between iSpaces. And an iSpace can participate in multiple WeSpaces. So a lot of content. Hope this is still making sense.
Yeah, I think people were a little confused about what an iSpace is, but I think hopefully you
Okay.
cleared that up.
An iSpace is just, remember we said a holon is at the same time a whole and a part. It's part of a larger whole, right? And it's got parts inside of it. So when you look inside of an agent, holon, you're looking at its iSpace. You're looking at its internals. You're what's going on inside the membrane. My data, my keys, my wallets, not visible outside the membrane unless I choose to make it visible. Okay. The WeSpace is like that interspace where Penny and Jeff and Stephen and Pat and so forth are other agents that I'm interacting with. We collectively are interacting in WeSpace. We're sharing a WeSpace on this Zoom call because we're all interacting on this Zoom call. Hopefully that.
Stephen Morris just raised his hand. Would it be all right for him to ask a question now?
Sure, Stephen, go for it.
Yeah, so basically, if I'm going to map this on integral, because I know some people here are integral geeks, or some who might watch it. iSpace is the internal, the personal space, and the WeSpace is the intersubjective space. Would that be fair, or a stretch?
It's a great. That's a longer conversation. I actually have a slide on the mapping the integral. It's not quite that, I don't think, but it's not a bad way to think about it. Yeah. So I'll give another example of an iSpace, which is a commons. So if you think about a commons, let me just play that out. Oh. I think that was out of sequence. We'll come back to the commons. Sorry, I think I had a slide out of sequence. So an agent is any entity with the capacity to respond to its environment, sense and respond. An agent space is bounded by a membrane and consists of a collection of agents, as well as the medium through which they interact. An iSpace is the view of the agent space from the perspective of the containing agent. And a WeSpace is a view of an agent space from the perspective of members of the WeSpace. So the right-hand side, all those different agents are interacting in WeSpace, one of which is me, who's in that WeSpace. So agents then can be composed into agent holarchies. So, by the way, my laptop is also an agent. It can sense and respond to its environment. My laptop, I bring it into as a member agent of my iSpace. So my laptop, my phone, and my tablet are examples of agents that are in my iSpace as a person. And evolution is really a dance between competition and cooperation. The story is often told from the perspective of it's all about competition, but it's actually a dance between competition and cooperation, as those of you familiar with pro-social will appreciate. So agents can be fractally composed into social holarchies. So I'm a person, I have an iSpace. My iSpace, my person, I can bring it to a swirl of competing people, a swirl of interacting people with no membrane. But when a WeSpace gains sufficient coherence, to establish a strong enough governance membrane, then a new I space emerges from the we space. So now this has a membrane enclosing it. See what happened there? Yeah. This, I had more slides I'm not going to get into today, but if you look at, David Sloan Wilson and E.O. Wilson's work on how multi-level selection works, is competition between groups. But if you can get a membrane, if you can tie their fates together, then you can get cooperation, and that group can outcompete other groups if it's got a membrane around it. So our pro-social group could then compete in a swirl of competing groups until we learn to cooperate one level up and a new I space forms. So this is the model of how map agents can be composed into holarchies, ultimately to global scale. So here we have the traditional top-down power dissemination hierarchy, the power over. Here I am at the bottom, the hierarchy. In the map, instead of being a unit at the bottom of a hierarchy, I'm actually at the center of a set of holarchies. So here I am in the middle, in that I space in the middle, and I'm participating in many we spaces, nesting out with more and more people. But I'm always at the center of my universe. In fact, so are you. And in fact, every holon in the map is the center of its own universe. And therefore, the human experience of the map is omniperspectival. What's that mean? That means you can jump around to any holon that's in the map, and you can ask it what the world looks like from its perspective. Remember, you can ask it, what properties do you have? What relationships do you participate in, right? All that web of relationships are from the perspective of whatever holon you're asking. So you can sort of jump your perspective into that map, that holon. Pat?
I just had one comment, one question.
Pat, you just muted yourself.
Just muted yourself, man.
Okay, you just showed. Thank you. You just showed the hierarchical, the structure we don't want to be, but there is, to me, there is a sense of the hierarchical in what you're presenting in terms of when someone like me, for instance, does not have as much. I'm a holon, but I don't have as much of the, let's say, the ability to grasp what you're saying, say, as Jeff or Chris, for instance. I'm at a different level of understanding, but how does that work so that it's not a hierarchy? You know what I'm saying? I'm not like at your level, but I want to get it. But
yeah, no, it's a really, really good question. Thanks for asking it. So there's this tendency to say hierarchy bad, flat good, right? Everybody should be equal in everything, right? But that's not actually how reality works, right? Stephen Morris will know. Ken Wilber talks about this a lot. There is hierarchy, right? What gives hierarchy a bad name is exactly that. It's the power dissemination hierarchies where power is disseminated from the top down. It's those kind of hierarchies that have some of the pathologies that we're talking about, right? But holarchies are hierarchies of holons. So there's still a holarchy going. There is still hierarchical structure, right? I can still belong, a holon is a part in a whole. Well, if I'm part of a larger whole, that's a larger structure that contains me, right? And that can be contained in something else, right? So there is a hierarchy there. Now, the one key difference is these are actually, in Wilber's terms, social holons, meaning it's not strict containment. Unlike the mitochondria in a cell, which can only be, it belongs to a single cell, we can participate in multiple social organisms, in multiple we spaces, right? So that's why I can participate in these we spaces. But there's certainly structure here. This is not unstructured. This is not flat. This is rethinking how power gets disseminated. So it's done in a power with model rather than power over. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Here's the common slide. I got that as sequence here. So let's take a look at might a common show up in the map? Well, I would say a commons is an I space. According to David Bolyer's definition, a commons is a social system, not just a bucket O resources, right? It's not just a common pool of resources. It's actually a social system. It's got people in it for the long-term stewardship of resources that preserves shared values and community identity, right? So here we have the stewarding agents. Remember the member agents of an I space? Those are the stewards of the commons. And these assets, remember we said assets are the resources that are temporarily being stewarded by an agent. Those are the resources being stewarded. And the shared values, those are expressed in the mimetic signature of the commons I space, where you say, these are the values that we, the members of this commons, adhere to, align to, or aspiring to. It's got a containing membrane. This is very important. There's got to be some sort of container, some sort of membrane here, so that the resources are not just pillaged, right? There's got to be some management around it. There's got to be some sense of community identity. And a commons is a self-organized system by which communities manage resources, both depletable and replenishable, with minimal or no reliance on the market or state. So do we see how the agent structure can be used, the I space structure in particular can be used to represent a commons? Is that making sense? Oh, yeah, and it adopts a governance model being a meme. So that's how you get that shared governance. Commons can offer services to manage the flow of stewarded resources. So the way resources flow into and out of the commons is through managed interfaces, through services, service offers, service agreements. A guild is also an I space. And I didn't finish this slide, so you'll have to take my word for it. Sorry. How do bioregions show up on the map? A bioregion, I would say, is a we space that's supporting the interaction of human and non-human agents. But importantly, instead of people owning land, people belong to bioregional we spaces, right? So the relationship, the whole relationship between me and the bioregion is I belong to the bioregion. I don't own it, I belong to it, right? With sufficient coherence, a bioregional we space can become a governed and stewarded I space one level up. Remember how I spaces emerge when you get enough coherence and governance? You get that membrane. So you could have a membrane around the bioregion. Bioregions overlap. There is no, again, this is a social holon concept, right? There isn't some strict partitioning of bioregions, right? Bioregions can overlap. And the areas of intersection provide natural conditions for interaction. That tells us, if we're structuring ourselves as groups, oh, we share a bioregion in some sense. So those are probably the groups that I'm going to want to interact with, right? So they can serve as a natural organizing principle for similarly overlapping social hierarchies. All right. How are we
Hey,
doing
Steve,
time?
before
Yeah.
you move, one question that actually people are sort of talking about already in the chat is Bill Bowie asked, why is a commons not a we space?
Mm.
And then people are saying, well, it kind of is, and it's kind of, anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's somewhat difficult to answer because it's somewhat of a continuum. But a commons, well, I would say a mismanaged commons or an unmanaged commons is a we space. Sort of the so-called tragedy of a commons arises when you have insufficient governance, when you don't have enough of a membrane, right? You don't have consequences. You don't have the pro-social design principles operating through the management of those resources. Then it's sort of the free-for-all. It's the tragedy of the commons. But if you're going to have a functioning commons, then it needs that membrane. It needs that governance model. It needs the structure around it of that social system. So that's why I would say a commons is an iSpace. A managed commons is an iSpace. Great question. All right, well, who's the map for? Well, in some sense, we're all in this together. So in a very real sense, the map is for every sentient being. But in the near term, the focus of the map is on Horizon 3 wayfinders. So if you're operating in Horizon 1, Horizon 2, not prepared for an entirely new economic system and an entirely new architecture, you might not find the map very helpful. Or maybe you will find it helpful and you're being seduced into Horizon 3. So it serves disillusioned individuals, people that can tell the path we're on is very, very dangerous, and maybe help them discover reasons for hope, maybe help them discover there are agents out in the world. There are bioregional projects that are doing this amazing stuff, right? So if I can just find them because they're on the map, maybe you figured out your role, then how do I connect with others? How do I get the resources I need to perform my role? Maybe I'm a thought leader contributing my memes to the meme pool, or I'm a landscape leader and my landscape. The map is for the landscape itself. Get the landscape agency. Maybe I'm an artist or an evolutionary storyteller. Maybe I'm an awakened investor trying to accelerate the emergence of regeneration. Or I'm a life scientist or a community weaver or an HX designer or a software developer or a meme certifier or a media producer. I invite you all just to sort of consider those, but also who's missing? Very one important omission here. Well, you may not fit in any of these boxes, right? You're a complex, multidimensional human being. And so another meaning of open-ended, it means fostering the emergence of new roles not anticipated by the designers of the map. So the map is extensible in the set of roles that you can define for agents. I love this quote from Alice Walker. If you've exchanged emails with me, this shows up in my email signature pretty frequently. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. So the map invites you to find your tribe, to find your vibe, by looking through agent directories, which are we spaces that you can register yourself for organizations in a directory that allows you to discover other agents based on shared values, shared purpose. Maybe you like the governance model that project has or that bioregion has. You can search based on visible reputation, shared landscape. They're in my place. They're in my geography. I'm in this watershed. Or it's shared community of practice. And again, this notion that a guild is an iSpace. So you can find other agents through searching in various dimensions. The map also invites you to claim your sovereignty by putting yourself on the map. So there's your iSpace, which is a private iSpace that encapsulates your data on your devices. And those are all, for those familiar with holochain, those are all holochain subagents within my iSpace. I can have my own ID, a single profile, and I can define multiple personas, which are just different subsets of that profile that I'm willing to share in different forums, in other we spaces, if you will. So I can claim my sovereignty. I can evolve my mimetic signature. This is like inner space work, right? So I can search through the meme pool for values that I resonate with. And I can add those to my mimetic signature by expressing the exhibit's relationship from my signature to those values. I can find services that are aligned with my values. Like maybe I heard about gene keys or ikigai or enneagram. And it turns out that those memes are expressed in software, perhaps by some agents that offer a gene keys service or an ikigai service or enneagram service. And if I find one that I want and the terms of the offer are acceptable to me, I can accept the offer and bring the application into my iSpace. That little sort of cylindrical shape underneath it, it's not the data, it's the descriptions of the data that this app manipulates. So I bring the app into my iSpace so I can store the data on my devices, my subagents. I can unify notifications through the notification center. I can dynamically generate my human experience through dynamically selecting visualizers that are stewarded in Commons. And this uses a component of the map called Dawn. I'm not going to have a time to talk about Dawn today. That's a big talk in its own right. But just suffice it to say, it is the human experience of the map. It's how the human experience is generated that allows you to interact with everything I'm talking about here. So I can claim my sovereignty, evolve your mimetic signature, claim your voice. You can steward new ideas. Maybe if you're Jeff, you can steward the idea of economics into the global meme pool. And maybe you can create art and podcasts and books and videos. That is, you can contribute. You can choose to share them or not. You could choose to share them into common resource pools. Those are all expressions then of that economics meme, right? So if people discover that, they can say, where can I learn more about it, right? So those are some invitations the map offers. Let's just briefly look at a couple of the other dimensions. We've talked about agents. Let's talk about resources. So resources and assets. A resource is a unit of quantitative or qualitative value. Remember, that was part of Joe's definition when he talked about an Earth Regeneration Fund being a collection of values, and they could be either quantitative or qualitative, that can flow between agents via services. So in the map, I was inspired by the Metacurrency project. Those familiar with Fernanda Ibarra and Arthur Brock sort of adopted their concept of resources. They could be physical, so books, water, gas, cereal, oxygen, CO2, those are all resources. Could be virtual, like information, ebooks, electronic orders, could be electronic currencies. You can have aspirational resources, your vision, your brand. You can have relational resources, the social capital, if you will. You can have energetic resources, subtle energy, intention, blessings, love. And open-ended also means that this list of resource types is extensible. The map does not limit you to these. So service events are how resources flow into and out of agents. A resource can be an expression of one or more memes. We saw how economics can be expressed in a book or a podcast. An asset is a resource that is temporarily being stewarded by an agent through that stewardship relationship. So I'm just trying to bring some of that ontology to life by illustrating what some key relationships are. So those are resources. If we look quickly at memes in the global meme pool, what is a meme? This is the Dawkins definition from 1976, self-replicating, mutating, and recombining unit of culture, carrying ideas, symbols, or practices that can be transmitted from one mind to another through some communication medium. So it's a replicator. They're so ubiquitous and so prevalent that we're not aware of them, right? So many of these memes operate below the level of conscious awareness. In fact, in general, they all do. So if memes are replicators, then what makes a good replicator? Well, Dawkins and Blackmore identified 3 qualities. The first is fidelity. Copy it accurately. You know, if you're copying soup, you could give somebody the soup and say, make it just like this, or you could give them the recipe. And now when the recipe get copied, yeah, you might make some errors, but if you pass the recipe along, they're not going to repeat your errors, like if you make the soup and give them the soup. So ability to be copied accurately. Fecundity means this thing gets replicated a lot, and longevity means the copying goes on for a long time. So many memes are frivolous. This is how it relates. The memes you see on the internet, the popular definition of memes looks like something like this, right? A picture with a cute phrase. Sometimes they don't need a phrase. How many times do you go to a hotel room and you find your toilet paper folded into a triangle at the end, show that the maid has been there, right? That's another meme. They don't have to be words, right? So these, especially in the internet world, the digital world, you have very high fidelity because digital media can be copied without loss, right? You might even have high fecundity. If these things go viral, you know, then they replicate a lot. But what they lack is longevity, right? These tend to be the 15 minutes of fame kind of thing. But memes with longevity shape civilizations. So think about the meme of separateness that we talked about in material culture. The notion that the universe is physical, mechanistic, and purposeless. Scarcity consciousness. The domination subservience hierarchy. That meme that Rian Eisler has explored in such depth goes back probably 5,000 years. Debt-backed positive interest rate currency, 2,000 years. Now suddenly money is not just a medium of exchange, it's also a store of value. And that leads to privatization of the commons. It leads to hoarding. It leads to scarcity consciousness. It leads to polarization of wealth. Charles Eisenstein and Bernard Lietaer's analysis of money, highly recommended to see just how pervasive and pernicious and devastating our concept of money is. Private corporations, 250 years. Profit is the sole measure of success. It probably goes back about 70 years. So these are memes that have some longevity, right? These are the kinds of memes that we're trying to activate new memes in response to, right? That's what the memetic activation platform is about. So I did a thought experiment here. If we think about life, biological life, you know, there's 3 domains of life. And then you've got, you know, the whole taxonomy that flows from that into kingdom, phylum, class, order, genus, species, and so forth, right? We've all seen this. So that's genetic replicator-based evolution. So I asked myself, well, what if there were memes are replicators? Could you do a similar taxonomy? Has there been a similar sort of evolutionary tree, if you will, for social organisms? I haven't done the research. This would require very serious research. So all I'm showing you here is just a notional thing of what it could look like. I make no claims to correctness on this, but you can see that somewhere on this chain we've got, and I just for whimsical purposes use Latin names because that's how species are, right? So corporatus privatus is the private corporation, and corporatus privatus profitus is the for-profit variant of that, right? And I've got corporatus privatus non-profitus. It's still a private corporation. And you've got public benefit corporations. All of those are rooted, though. They all share the meme as part of their mimetic signatures of debt-backed positive interest rate currency. And that, in fact, flows from mind-matter dualism, which just is a manifestation of the memes of material culture of separation, domination, and exploitation, right? So we see how fundamental those are, and all the different species of social organisms that flow down this tree, right? But what if you had the means of interconnection, partnership, and reverence of planetary culture? Well, indigenous cultures didn't take this 5,000-year detour down separation, domination, and exploitation. It's why indigenous wisdom is so valuable now, right? So needed, because we're returning to means that are well understood and well lived, right? And so there can be other social organisms emerge from that. Libero pecuniam is free money. That was a brilliant book that Silvio Giselle, I think he was a Belgian economist, in the early 1900s came up with an alternative to debt-backed positive interest rate currency. He came up with this concept of demurraged currency, negative interest rate currency. He called it free money. Changes the dynamics totally. But that's just one example, right? What if we explore these other memes? What if our thought leaders can put new memes onto this branch on the left? Remember the old map, the ancient maps where they had terra incognita for that whole territory of the globe? I don't know, Well, what I've tried to invite people into is this notion of mimetica incognita, right? There's a whole, plethora of social species in phyla and so forth, waiting to be, products of evolution through our collective efforts. So the global meme pool is a network of well-stewarded information commons. And so just to give you a small subset of what it could contain are things like this, right? You could have different governance models, different currency models, and so forth. And so if I just show some of the relationships, a governance model itself is a holon. That means I can say, well, what properties do you have? Oh, well, I have a name property. Oh, what kind of value does it have? Well, it has a short string value, which is current value for this property is sociocracy. It's also got a description property. That's a long markdown string, and its current value is blah, 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 right? So that's what it looks like when you ask, oh, hold on, what properties do you have? Governance model has a family. It belongs to the family of governance models. It may be stewarded by an organization called Sociocracy for All. It may be expressed by a book called Sociocracy for All. It may support the pro-social core design principles, right? It may be exhibited by a whole number of agents, right? They've included sociocracy, they've adopted it, right? And so now I can ask, has anybody else used this? And what context did they have? And how similar is their context to my context? And how well do I think it might work? And what kind of reputation are they giving to this model, right? Agents can also offer services. So Sociocracy for All offers consultant services. If you're trying to implement sociocracy and you've discovered the meme of sociocracy, and now you found, oh, here's an organization that can help me implement it. I really like what I'm finding out about it, might be a good fit. I need help. So that's memes. Oh, quickly on services. Not going to be able to do this justice. Love this quote from Tagore. So what I'm going through here is that not only can you claim your sovereignty, evolve your mimetic signature, claim your voice, steward new ideas and creative expressions, share them in trusted we spaces, find your tribe, and find your vibe. You can also get in the flow. You can find services that fit your needs and align with your values based on the shared vocabulary of the meme pool. You can participate in reciprocal value flows based on multidimensional definitions of value. We saw those different kinds of value. There's nothing that says a mimetic signature of a service offer can't include multiple dimensions. It could carry a carbon footprint cost and a social cost and a financial cost, for example. Getting in the flow allows you to align your economic self, what you're doing to sustain yourself and your family, with your essential self, with what your heart is calling you to do. I'm going to stop here because we're almost at the bottom of the hour, and ask if people can go a little bit longer. I will go through the sequence on how services work and then wrap it up. I think Pat's waving goodbye. Thanks, man. It'll be on the recording. I'm getting some thumbs up, so I'll probably just continue this further, but really appreciate your presence and your engagement. Don't miss session 3. That's when I'll stop talking so much, and it'll be a true interactive period for reflection. Thanks, man. And thanks to anybody who needs to leave. But I'll go ahead and continue this sequence just so we get it down on tape, if you will. All right, so here's an example of a physical service. You've got a service providing agent. In this case, it's a Cajun food truck. Here's an offer. Services have offers, and offers have 2 dimensions. There's the horizontal dimension, the horizontal promise, if you will. Okay, you can get a muffaletta for $5. That's the horizontal promise. But an offer can also include a vertical promise. All the ingredients are going to be sourced from local farms. They're all organic, and the Cajun food truck is a certified B Corp. That's part of the vertical promise that's incumbent in this offer. Now, the implementation of this service, that's what goes on inside the truck, right? The truck is the membrane. The implementation of the muffaletta making, that's what's happening inside the truck. In fact, the truck itself is part of the implementation. But let's suppose Rosa, as a service requesting agent, is saying, hey, I'd like a large muffaletta. Placing that order turns the offer into an agreement. She found the terms of muffaletta for $5 acceptable. So you have this horizontal value flow. $5 goes that way, the muffaletta goes that way. Notice that generates a sequence of events. There's the order event, the order accepted event, which is when the agreement is formed. The food is delivered, the payment is received. So the map is designed to support agents and agent hierarchies, discoverable virtual service offerings with pluggable promises. You can come up with your own promise. Agreements, which are a generalization of smart contracts with partial automatic enforcement by the map itself. Resource flows via service invocations, and auditable, immutable, non-repeatable, non-forgeable event logs via holochain that track everything that happens here. So services are placed in we spaces by offering agents. So when you offer a service, you're going to say, okay, here's its name, here's its version, here's its description. It has a mimetic signature. It can specify information access agreements. It can say, in order to deliver this service, I need to know this information. So if you accept this offer, you're willing to share this information with me, and this is the information in turn I will share with you. That's what these information access agreements encode. That's how we get the data sovereignty. That's how we get the controlled sharing. The offer can say what protocols we can communicate over. This is how the evolution of protocols can be handled. Keys to handle the interactions, life cycles, and flows. All of those things are expressed at 3 levels. This follows the Creative Commons license type architecture. So there's a machine readable form of this offer that software can understand. There's a human readable expression of this offer that humans can understand. And then there's a legal expression of this offer that works within legal jurisdictions, right? So sometimes you can't enforce everything systematically. You need to appeal to a legal authority. So you can have the legal terms of this offer expressed in the legal description of the offer. All three levels are included in a digitally signed bundle. That means they can't be changed. They're immutable. They're non-repudiable. You can't say I didn't agree to it. They're non-forgeable. It's clear who the parties were to the agreement. So agreements govern agent interactions in WeSpace. So here we've got, let's say, a healthcare agent on the left. We've got me on the right. They're offering a service of a diagnostic service. I'm got a sore throat or whatever. I want to get find out what's going on. So we have an agreement, and that means we're operating in a dedicated WeSpace. It's only the doctor and I. If this were a real world model, you'd also see an insurance company in this WeSpace. So I'm just trying to illustrate a little bit how these information access agreements work here. So let's say I want this service, and the service said, well, if we're going to diagnose you, we need access to your personal health record. So let's say R1, asset R1 on the right is my personal health record. So when I invoke this service, I move R1 from inside my membrane, from my iSpace, into the WeSpace, represented by the agreement. It can then flow across using some protocol specified in the agreement to get to the healthcare agent's side of the WeSpace. They can then bring it into their membrane so they can use it in their diagnosis. Now, maybe they could store that, but actually the agreement can spell out, that information access agreement can spell out whether or not they're allowed to persist it or not. So I might say, no, you can't store it. The agreement gives you access to this data whenever you need it. And I think I mentioned when I was at Oracle, I led their HIPAA compliance effort. It turns out taking custody of the information is what causes them to incur the HIPAA compliance burden. So it's actually, there's a value proposition for healthcare agents to not persist the data, because then they have to protect it. So as long as they can get access to it whenever they need it, whenever they're doing the diagnosis, they don't actually have to store it. So now they do the diagnosis. R7 is the diagnosis. It goes the inverse path from their iSpace out into the WeSpace governed by our agreement, comes to my membrane. It's brought into my iSpace. So that's how services flow, sort of how information is protected. All right. Enough of that. So what if we had an open source, open-ended, decentralized lifecycle platform? You've seen all of this. Do you see how all of this can be done? I'll leave that as an exercise for the reader in the interest of time. But let me put it this way. The whole goal of this talk was to realize, the title of the talk, right, is realizing the promise of the Earth Regeneration Fund. And so we started by saying, hey, we're in a meta crisis. We're in a cultural shift. We're in the great transition. It's a shift of these memes from material to planetary culture. We can have a different future, but that requires a new kind of enterprise, which requires a new mindset, a new architecture, a new platform. So I hope what I've demonstrated is some credence to the thought that the combination of these things can in fact yield a new economic system where we can reclaim our sovereignty, where we can collaborate and synergize with one another, where all sources of value can be related together, where the land is the bank of natural capital, where we can have land-based regenerative projects fractally nested to yield evolutionary coherence at global scale. So quickly, well, who's in? Does that sound like something you want? Is this an enterprise you can be seduced to participate and help build?
Seduction complete.
So quickly, I'm just going to show you the development status. This is the architecture for the tech geeks. Not going to go into the details here. What I'll just say is that in the map prototype, these components are P0, which is the stage I'm in right now, is P0 prototyping. That includes visualizers, holons, descriptors, this uniform API, and the visualizer application, if you will, DAWN, the Dynamic Adaptive Holon Navigator. Next, we'll be adding agent spaces and resources and memes in the notification center. And then adapters, which is how this world talks to external apps that are not yet native to the map. So to accelerate this, if we want to materialize this ecosystem faster, I need core developers, that the Rust skills and front-end technologies in particular. I need some money to pay those people that are coming with their heart, but also need their economic self taken care of. And I need development partners. And I already have several development partners that I'm super excited about. I'm going to feature one of those in session 4. Yeah, open to other development partners who want to bring stuff to the ecosystem. So what's next? Well, the seduction continues. It's like a junior high school dance, right? I'm walking over and asking y'all if you're willing to dance, rather trembling inside, but I'm inviting you to participate in a shared dialogue in session 3, right? It's an open agenda, but among the things that could be on the dance card on the set list are exploring how the vision of the Earth Regeneration Fund intersects with your own attributions, aspirations, and contributions. So what is it that's alive in you? And how does that intersect in this conversation? Where is it that you feel called to act? You know, what layer, what horizon, which of the horizontal structural layers or the vertical horizons, you know, do you feel drawn to? And if we're really feeling it, we could do some thought experiments where you can bring your vision to the group, and together we'll explore how person-centric architecture and the different capabilities of the map that I just described might help you overcome barriers and realize your goals. So there should be an opportunity to connect, spark creativity, explore pathways for turning vision into collective action. And then in session 4, be an invitation to accelerate your bioregional mapping projects. And a byproduct is it offers you an on-ramp to the map ecosystem as it comes online. So that'll be what's coming up on the adjacent path forward in session 4. That's it. I can tell there were massive number of chats in the chat, and apologies that we went a few minutes long, but I appreciate you hanging there. And yeah, I'm willing to entertain a few questions now, keeping in mind that we will have session 3 to just, you know, be together and explore these reflections.
Steve, I feel like I'm always the first one off the bat sometimes.
Appreciate it. But
yeah, I mean, I'm just really looking forward to the conversation because a lot of what we were trying to imagine with Regenerate Cascadia is needing the digital architecture to be able to hold the processes that you know, and so almost everything you've named is what needs to be how that needs to start coming together. So, and knowing that there are people like with so much more thought having gone in, like you and others, but just what you've laid out is just, all I can say is just very, very exciting, but just how resonant it is and just how necessary that is. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Yeah. And I look forward to the collaborations. This is just the opening dialogue, right? Andrew.
When can we get our hands on this?
Yes, yes. Well, depends on how much help I get building it, but yeah, we're a ways away yet. But as I say, in session 4, we'll be offering an on-ramp that I think can offer you immediate help and give you a path to adoption.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Cool. Chris?
I don't know if I want to, I'm trying to be provocative here, but I'm just thinking about the future that we're moving into. And, with a lot of, well, with all digital systems, I'm always thinking about security and the threat environment that we're in. So it's one thing, when you think about information systems that are in a, the dominant paradigm, right, that powers that be want to see persist. But now imagine you're talking about building infrastructure for a new paradigm to emerge that various powers that be will not want to see emerge. And so I'm always thinking, and particularly when I see what you've laid out and really, a framework for thinking about kind of bringing everything into a digital context that makes me very nervous, and I'm thinking about what things should not be where the foundation is digital. So it's not a question, it's more of a comment. And particularly, when I think about the exponential advance of AI right now, and we're already seeing where, like large language models are being used by hacker teams to accelerate their pace of going on the attack. So when I think about particularly economic systems being built in such a way and where potentially we're creating, tremendous value, but also it's a point of vulnerability. Because I just don't believe anybody when they say, oh, my system is totally secure. No, there's no notion of total security, right? And particularly when there's an enticing target there, if people have enough, essentially knowledge and resources, it will be exploited, right? So I just assume everything can be compromised if there's sufficient will to do that. So maybe the question is just, I'm sure you've thought about these aspects as well. And does that keep you up at night at all? Just thinking about the change in, the kind of the cyber landscape that we're moving into. Yeah, I'm just curious how all that lands.
Well, yeah, there was a lot in what you said there, and I think I'm not going to try and address all of it now. I think that
totally.
is a
Yeah, queuing it up.
Security is critical. I look at, just as I went to the study of how cooperation evolved in evolution and how evolution overcame the barriers to cooperation, and how I looked at the patterns of cellular interactions that Diane Tegetmeier articulated to inform the design of the map. It's the same for security. What's our security system, right? It's our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So ability to sense and respond to threats and adapt, right? So that's one thread of that, or one, I'll leave it unexplored, but that's one aspect of it.
Okay.
The other thing is, decentralization is a big part of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the information is stored on my devices, I have custody, right? I'm not relying on Amazon or Google or somebody else's security processes to protect it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm using all the cryptographic techniques that, the same cryptographic techniques that blockchain uses, but without the lack of scaling and some of the other deficiencies of blockchain. They're not unbreakable, but one advantage of decentralization is if I've got all of my data in a bank, it becomes a very high value target, right? It's a very large attack surface, right?
Yeah.
if the same cryptographic techniques used to protect the bank's data are protecting my data, so it takes the same computational resources to break into my iSpace, it's nowhere near the same value, right? So
Totally.
those resources will go to the bigger value target. So this is where decentralization can make a huge difference. So those are just some hints at some answers, but yes, it's a very important set of how we do detection and response when there's violations and so forth. And yeah, this is also emergent area, so we don't even know what the threat matrix is going to look like in these new designs.
Totally. Yeah, we'd be foolish to think that we could predict that for even a decade out.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, great question, Stephen.
So I raised my hand, Chris, to just sort of speak to that real quickly too, because I've been following Holochain from the start. And if you're not familiar with it, the fact that it's designed with biomimicry, like that alone, it's like how the same way the natural world responds to threats is the way stuff built on top of Holochain will. It's not necessarily always preventing the threat, but it's stopping it once it's happened, right? Rather than making everything 100% locked down, it's identify the bad actor and eject the bad actor from the system. So there's a lot there that doesn't get touched on that makes this a totally different way to think than you're used to thinking with the bank and with Facebook being hacked or your credit card being hacked. Not that there's no issues at all, but like Steve said, we have no idea because right now it does look foolproof, believe it or not.
Yeah, I just don't believe that. I don't believe
Well,
anything.
I know, but
but I think thanks for bringing that in, Stephen. I think there is a huge the people that are awake at night thinking about the security of those have been the Holochain folks for years now. And so I don't think it's perfect. There is no perfect protections, as you say, but there's been a lot of pretty serious and deep thought put into securing Holochain applications. That's one of the reasons I'm building on Holochain.
The technical hacks as far as security will be the social engineering hacks like happen now. It'll be hard to find the data on the network, but it won't be hard to necessarily compromise Jeff by getting him drunk and having him hand over his passwords or pretend to be somebody else. And, some of those social engineering hacks could still work. But you can't find the nodes easily, Holochain.
Yeah.
So it's hard to hack when you can't find it. And I'll leave it there so John can.
Yeah, John.
Hello, guys. Thanks, Stephen. I just saw Stephen in Denver actually earlier this year. And good to see some familiar faces, some new ones. I wanted to say, not so much a question, just a couple of things. I missed last week. I watched the video recording and I was just floored, like pretty much everybody on the call. Also because I had a similar trajectory through enterprise architecture, financial services industry. I was a business process management expert for over 10 years. So whatever you were talking about, I was so reminded of that. And also what I wanted to throw in is that for the past 2 years, what I have been very much focusing on is even sort of higher up in the stack is how do we get an identity into the hands of a very non-tech community as the regenerative community is, so they can participate in this new world of just digital signatures. Because whatever you do on these systems, these decentralized systems we talk about, you interact with it through cryptography. There is really that's at least right now the way to go. So we need an identity and the ability technically to apply these private key signatures. And so what I would love to talk to you about next week So I'm looking forward to that session. Is that I have been building an app to try out a lot of hypotheses and play around with crypto, with decentralized organizations, and learn how can that be applied to bioregions, and feel like that's something I can bring to the group as well. So I just over the summer discovered a new tool that I think is going to make a huge difference, because to summarize it, it is a key maker. It is a decentralized infrastructure to make crypto keys, and it is chain agnostic or elliptic curve agnostic, meaning it can make keys for Ethereum, for Solana, for Holochain, right? So because what my concern is that all these different apps that are being built, and you look into refi with open forest protocol or decentralized MRV, if we don't, and this is sort of the interesting part, I think we need to make a recommendation to put a tool into people's hands who want to try these things, because right now we're still asking them, make a MetaMask wallet or sign up on this chain, but then they can't try out the app over here. So that's to explain where I'm coming from a little bit. I appreciate, Steve, you so much, how much thinking has gone into this. I'd love to get involved. But again, because I'm a builder, that's my thing that I can bring to the table. I can make stuff, digital stuff. So looking forward to chatting a little more next week, but I think it's going to be interesting.
Sounds good. Thanks for bringing all of that in. Love to compare notes with you. I spent a fair amount of my career as a business process architect myself, so I'm sure we have some
funny. Okay.
As we could compare. Cool. Well, thank you so much for the dialogue, and for those of you who hung in there. I think we probably need to bring this to a close as we approach the 2-hour mark. But thanks once again for a rich session. But really, let's reconvene in a week together where we can explore this conversation at greater depth. Any final words? You can all go off mute as you say goodbye.
My brain hurts.
Sorry about that. I know I kind of opened the fire hose on you, but
Good stuff, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Everyone.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, everyone.
bye-bye.